My boss fired me for saving a life. What she didn't know would destroy her career forever. I'm Michael Thompson, and I've been a registered nurse at St. Mary's Medical Center for 8 years. Every morning, I'd walk through those glass doors at 6:45 a.m. sharp, grab my coffee from the machine that's been broken for 3 months, and check on my patients like they were family. Because to me, they were. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was updating charts. My phone buzzed with an unknown number, and normally I'd let it go to voicemail. But something made me answer. Mr. Thompson, this is Margaret from Riverside Private Care. We have an urgent situation. My heart stopped. Riverside was the most exclusive medical facility in the city, the kind of place where celebrities and billionaires went when they needed complete privacy. I'd worked there part-time on weekends, building a reputation for handling delicate cases with absolute discretion. What's the situation? I asked, stepping into an empty room. We have a 70-year-old patient, critical condition. He specifically requested you. The family is... They're willing to pay premium rates for private care, full-time, starting immediately. I felt my stomach drop. Full-time meant leaving St. Mary's for at least a week, maybe more. And my boss, Sarah Martinez, had already made it crystal clear that we were in our busy season, which apparently lasted 11 months of the year. How critical are we talking? I whispered. Touch and go. Honestly, Mr. Thompson, without round-the-clock specialized care, we're looking at maybe 48 hours. Someone was dying. Someone who trusted me enough to ask for me by name. How do you say no to that? But then I thought about Sarah's face during our last staff meeting. I don't care if your grandmother is on her deathbed, she'd said, looking directly at me after I'd requested time off for my daughter Emma's school play. We have quotas to meet and patients to serve. Personal issues stay personal. The irony wasn't lost on me. A patient was literally dying, and she'd probably call it a personal issue. I need to make a call, I told Margaret. Give me 10 minutes. I found Sarah in her office, hunched over spreadsheets like always. Her door was open, but she didn't look up when I knocked. What is it, Thompson? Make it quick. I need to request emergency leave, starting tomorrow. A patient in critical condition has specifically requested my care, and no. That was it. Just no. Not even a question about the circumstances. Sarah, this person could die without proper care. They've asked for me specifically because you think you're some kind of hero nurse? She finally looked up, her expression cold as winter. Let me remind you of something, Michael. You work here. Your patients are here. Not at some fancy private clinic where rich people pay extra to have their hands held. I felt heat rising in my chest. This isn't about money. This is about saving someone's life. Everything is about money. She leaned back in her chair. You're already on thin ice after that stunt you pulled last month. The stunt she was referring to was staying late to comfort a terminal patient's family. Apparently, overtime wasn't in the budget. Sarah, please, just 1 week. I'll make up every hour when I get back. I'll cover extra shifts. Work weekends. You'll work weekends anyway. She turned back to her computer. Request denied. And Michael, don't even think about calling in sick. I'll know. I stood there for a moment, watching her type, completely indifferent to the fact that someone's life was hanging in the balance. This was the woman who'd give motivational speeches about putting patients first and the sacred trust of healthcare. My phone buzzed. A text from my wife, Patricia. Emma's soccer game is at 4. Try to make this one? I thought about Emma, my 8-year-old daughter, who'd started introducing me to her friends as my daddy who saves people. What would I tell her when she asked why I let someone die because my boss said no? I have to do this, Sarah. She looked up again, and this time there was something dangerous in her eyes. Excuse me? This patient is going to die without proper care. I'm the only one they trust. I can't live with myself if I don't help. Then maybe you should find a job at a charity. Her voice was ice cold. Because this is a business, Thompson, and in business, there are consequences for putting yourself before the company. I left her office knowing I'd probably just signed my own termination papers. But as I dialed Margaret's number, I thought about why I became a nurse in the first place. It wasn't for the paycheck or the benefits. It was for moments like this, when someone needed me to be their lifeline. Margaret, it's Michael. I'll be there tomorrow morning. The patient was Richard Davis, a distinguished 70-year-old man with kind eyes and a weak smile. When I walked into his room at Riverside, he was barely conscious, but he managed to squeeze my hand. "Thank you for coming," he whispered. "I know this wasn't easy." He had no idea. Over the next 5 days, I lived at that facility. I monitored his vitals every hour, adjusted medications, coordinated with specialists, and stayed by his side through the worst of it. There were moments when I thought we were going to lose him. His blood pressure would plummet, or his breathing would become so labored that I'd prepare myself to call his family. But slowly, gradually, he began to improve. Richard was different from most patients I'd worked with. Despite being in a facility that probably cost more per day than I made in a month, he was humble, grateful for everything. He'd apologize for asking for water. He'd thank me for adjusting his pillow. "You remind me of my grandson," he told me on day 3, when he was finally strong enough to have real conversations. "He's about your age, works too hard, cares too much." "Caring too much isn't a bad thing," I said, checking his IV. "No, it's not. But sometimes the world punishes us for it." I thought about Sarah's threat, about the messages she'd been leaving on my phone. Increasingly angry voicemails about abandoning my responsibilities and insubordination. I'd stopped listening to them after the first few. "Mr. Davis, can I ask you something? What do you do for work?" He smiled. "I'm retired now. But I spent my life building things, companies, relationships, trust. The most important thing I learned is that how you treat people when they're vulnerable says everything about who you are." By day 6, Richard was sitting up, eating solid food, and talking about going home. The crisis had passed. I'd done what I came to do. "You saved my life," he said as I prepared to leave. "I won't forget that." I drove back to St. Mary's on Monday morning with a knot in my stomach. My phone had 17 missed calls from Sarah, and the last voicemail was just heavy breathing, followed by, "You're done, Thompson." I walked into the hospital like a man walking to his execution. Sarah was waiting for me at the nurses' station, arms crossed, surrounded by the morning shift staff. This was going to be public. Well, well, look who decided to show up. The other nurses stopped what they were doing. David Anderson, who'd been my friend since nursing school, gave me a look that said, "I tried to warn you." "Pack your things," Sarah announced loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "You're fired." "Sarah, can we discuss this privately?" "Oh, You want privacy now? After you publicly humiliated me by ignoring a direct order? She was enjoying this. I could see it in the way she stood a little straighter, spoke a little louder. You abandoned your patients here to play hero somewhere else. That's called insubordination. I saved someone's life. You disobeyed me. And now you get to learn what happens when you put your ego before your job. She smiled then, cruel and satisfied. Enjoy unemployment. The words hit me like a slap. Around us, the hospital continued its morning routine, but everything felt frozen. Patients needed their medications, families needed updates, and I was being escorted out by security like some kind of criminal. I called Patricia from the parking lot. Honey, why are you calling? Shouldn't you be at work? I got fired. Silence. Then, what happened? I saved someone's life, and Sarah Martinez decided that was grounds for termination. Oh, Michael. Her voice broke a little. What are we going to do? Emma's school tuition is due next month. And the mortgage? We'll figure it out. I'll find something else. But as I sat in my car, watching colleagues I'd worked with for 8 years walk past without making eye contact, I wondered if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. That evening, Richard called. Michael, I just wanted to check on you. How was your first day back? I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. This man had just fought for his life, and the last thing he needed was to worry about the consequences of his care. It was fine, Mr. Davis. How are you feeling? Much better, thanks to you. Listen, I was wondering if you might be available for follow-up care over the next few weeks. I'd be happy to compensate you for your time. I closed my eyes. Of course, whatever you need. At least someone still needed me. But as I tucked Emma into bed that night, and she asked why I looked sad, I realized something that would haunt me for days. I had no idea who Richard Davis really was, or how much power he wielded in the very system that had just destroyed my career. The man whose life I'd saved was about to save mine in return. And Sarah Martinez was about to learn that some patients are more dangerous than she ever imagined. 2 weeks into unemployment, I was spending my mornings at Riverside, helping Richard with his recovery. What started as follow-up care had become something more like friendship. He insisted on paying me, though I would have done it for free. The man who'd nearly died in my arms was now walking laps around his garden, telling stories about his late wife and asking about my family. You know, Michael, he said one afternoon as I checked his blood pressure, I've been thinking about your situation at the hospital. I'd finally told him about getting fired the week before. He'd listened with the kind of attention that made you feel like your problems mattered. It's not your fault, Mr. Davis. I made my choice. Call me Richard, please. And yes, you made a choice. The right choice. He paused, watching me pack up my equipment. Tell me about your boss again. Sarah Martinez? What about her? Just curious about her management style. How long has she been in charge? I thought about it. About 3 years. She came in during the hospital's financial restructuring, promised to increase efficiency and cut costs. And has she succeeded? I laughed bitterly. Depends how you measure success. Our patient satisfaction scores have dropped. We've lost some of our best nurses, and morale is at an all-time low. But hey, we're hitting our profit targets. Richard nodded slowly, the way he did when he was processing information. What's the name of your hospital's parent company? Davis Corp Healthcare. Why? Something flickered across his face, but it was gone so quickly I almost missed it. Just wondering. I've been in business a long time. Sometimes the names sound familiar. That afternoon, as I was leaving Riverside, I noticed something different. There were more visitors than usual, and they weren't family members. These were people in expensive suits, carrying briefcases, speaking in hushed tones, business people. Richard was in his room with 3 men I didn't recognize. Through the partially open door, I heard fragments of conversation. Quarterly reports, board meeting, and restructuring recommendations. When I knocked, Richard quickly wrapped up the meeting. "Gentlemen, we'll continue this tomorrow. Michael, perfect timing. How are Patricia and Emma?" "They're good. Emma asks about you every day. She's decided you're her honorary grandfather." Richard's eyes softened. "I'd be honored. You know, I was just telling these colleagues about the exceptional care I received. How a nurse went above and beyond, risked his own job to save my life." One of the suited men looked at me with interest. "Really? What hospital?" "St. Mary's Medical Center," Richard answered before I could. "Under the supervision of a Sarah Martinez." The man made a note on his phone. "I see. Well, we should be going. Richard, we'll have those reports ready for your review." After they left, I helped Richard with his evening medication. He seemed distracted, distant. "Everything okay?" Fine. Just some business matters to sort out." He looked at me carefully. "Michael, you mentioned your colleague David Anderson still works at St. Mary's?" "Yeah, he's been trying to keep me updated on the chaos. Apparently Sarah's been in a terrible mood since I left, taking it out on everyone." "What kind of chaos?" "The usual. Short-staffed, overworked, patients complaining. David says they've had 3 nurses quit in the past 2 weeks. Sarah's response was to increase everyone's patient load." Richard frowned. "That doesn't sound sustainable." "It's not. But sustainability isn't Sarah's priority. She's focused on the next quarterly report." That evening, Patricia found me staring at job listings on my laptop. "Any luck?" "A few possibilities. There's an opening at General, but the pay is 20% less than what I was making, and they want someone who can start immediately, work nights." She sat beside me on the couch. "We'll make it work. We always do." I keep thinking about what Richard said, about how treating people when they're vulnerable says everything about who you are. I closed the laptop. What does it say about me that I'm not fighting this? It says you're focusing on moving forward instead of looking backward. That's not a bad thing. But something nagged at me. The way Richard had asked about Davis Corp Healthcare, the business meetings at Riverside, the pointed questions about Sarah. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. While Emma was at school and Patricia was at her part-time job, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I Googled Richard Davis Corp. My laptop screen filled with results. Richard Davis, Chairman and CEO of Davis Corp Industries. Davis announces retirement from active leadership. Healthcare mogul Richard Davis steps back from day-to-day operations. My hands started shaking as I clicked through article after article. Photos of Richard at charity galas, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, board meetings. The same kind, humble man I'd been caring for was apparently one of the most powerful businessmen in the state. And Davis Corp Industries? It wasn't just the parent company of Davis Corp Healthcare. It was the parent company of dozens of healthcare facilities, including St. Mary's Medical Center. Richard Davis was Sarah Martinez's boss. several levels up the corporate ladder, but still her boss. I'd been caring for the man who owned the hospital that fired me. My phone rang. David Anderson. Mike, you need to hear this. Sarah just got word that there's going to be a corporate inspection, like high-level corporate. She's been running around all morning like her hair's on fire. When? Today. This afternoon. Nobody knows who's coming or why, but Sarah got a call from someone way up the food chain. She's been cleaning offices, reviewing files, the whole 9 yards. I thought about Richard's business meetings, the men in suits, the careful questions about hospital management. David, has Sarah mentioned anything about patient care reviews, satisfaction scores? Funny you should ask. She's been pulling files on everyone who's been fired or quit in the past year, including yours. And she's been really interested in any complaints about patient care or management decisions. After David hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone. Should I call Richard? Confront him about who he really was? The man had just recovered from a life-threatening illness. The last thing he needed was stress. But part of me wondered, did he know who I was when he requested me? Was this all some elaborate setup? I decided to drive to Riverside. If nothing else, I owed it to both of us to clear the air. I found Richard in the garden, reading a newspaper. He looked up when he saw me approaching, and something in his expression told me he'd been expecting this conversation. You know, don't you? He said simply. Davis Corp Industries. You're the Richard Davis. He folded his newspaper carefully. I wondered when you'd figure it out. I'm surprised it took this long. Did you know who I was when you requested me? Did you know I worked for one of your hospitals? No. His answer was immediate and firm. I requested you because you'd taken care of my friend's wife last year at Riverside. She couldn't stop talking about the nurse who stayed with her through the night when she was scared, who held her hand and talked to her about her grandchildren to keep her calm. I remembered her. Mrs. Peterson. Pancreatic cancer. She'd been terrified of dying alone. But once I got to know you, Richard continued, and you told me about your situation, I became very interested in learning more about St. Mary's management. The business meetings you've been investigating. I've been doing my due diligence. When someone tells me that a hospital supervisor fired an exemplary nurse for providing life-saving care to a patient, that raises red flags about the quality of leadership at that facility. I sat down on the bench beside him. What did you find? What I found was a pattern of poor decision-making, declining patient satisfaction scores, and a management philosophy that prioritizes short-term profits over long-term sustainability. He looked at me seriously. Sarah Martinez has been running that hospital into the ground, Michael, and today she's going to have to answer for it. At exactly 2 p.m., Richard Davis walked through the main entrance of St. Mary's Medical Center. He was dressed in a conservative gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase, and accompanied by 2 other executives I recognized from the Riverside meetings. I wasn't there to see it, but David called me within the hour. Mike, you're not going to believe this. Remember that corporate inspection? It was Richard Davis. The Richard Davis. And he's not happy. What happened? Nobody knew who he was at first. Sarah gave him the full tour. You know how she gets when she's trying to impress people. Bragging about efficiency improvements, cost-cutting measures, tough personnel decisions. I felt my stomach tighten. Please tell me she didn't. Oh, she did. She specifically mentioned firing you as an example of holding employees accountable for insubordination, said she had to make tough choices to maintain discipline in front of Richard Davis, in front of the man who owns the hospital, the man whose life you saved. David's voice was filled with amazement. Mike, when he revealed who he was, I thought Sarah was going to faint right there in the hallway. What did he say? He asked to see your personnel file, everything, your performance reviews, patient feedback, the circumstances of your termination. And Mike, your file is spotless. 8 years of exemplary service, glowing reviews from patients and colleagues, 0 disciplinary actions until the day you were fired. I could picture Sarah frantically trying to justify her decision, scrambling for reasons that would make sense to a man who valued the kind of care I'd provided. He asked her to explain the hospital's policy on medical leave for healthcare emergencies. She couldn't because there isn't one. He asked about patient satisfaction scores under her leadership. They've dropped 15%. He asked about staff retention. We've lost 12 nurses in 18 months. And then he asked her why she thought firing the nurse who saved his life was in the best interest of patient care at St. Mary's Medical Center. I closed my eyes, imagining Sarah's face as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. David, what's going to happen? I don't know. But Mike, I think you should keep your phone close today. Something tells me you're going to get a very interesting call. The call came at 6:47 p.m. My phone showed Sarah's number, but when I answered, the voice was completely different from the cold, authoritative tone I was used to. Michael, this is Sarah Martinez. I was hoping we could talk. About what, Sarah? About coming back to work. There's been a misunderstanding about your termination. I almost laughed. After 3 weeks of unemployment, of wondering how I was going to pay Emma's tuition and our mortgage, Sarah Martinez was calling it a misunderstanding. Really? What kind of misunderstanding? Well, it's complicated, but the bottom line is, we need you back. Immediately. We're prepared to offer you a significant raise, better benefits, and a formal apology for any confusion about your departure. I could hear the desperation in her voice. The woman who'd humiliated me in front of my colleagues, who'd told me to enjoy unemployment with a cruel smile, was now begging. Sarah, help me understand something. When you fired me 3 weeks ago, you said I was insubordinate, that I'd abandoned my patients, that there were consequences for putting myself before the company. Has something changed? The circumstances. They're more complex than I initially understood. You mean you found out who my patient was? Silence. Then, Michael, can we please just move past this? We need experienced nurses, and you're one of the best we have. I'm willing to admit I may have been hasty in my decision. May have been hasty? I felt 8 years of frustration bubbling up. Sarah, you destroyed my career because I saved someone's life. You humiliated me in front of my colleagues. You threatened my family's financial security. And now you're calling it hasty? I understand you're upset. No, I don't think you do understand. Because if you understood, you'd realize that this isn't about a job anymore. This is about the kind of person you are and the kind of leader you've chosen to be. I could hear her breathing, probably calculating how much trouble she was in. What do you want, Michael? Name your terms. What did I want? 3 weeks ago, I would have done anything to get my job back. But now, after watching Richard Davis conduct himself with dignity and integrity, even in his most vulnerable moments. I realized I wanted something more than just my old position. I wanted change. I'll think about it, Sarah, but I need some time to consider my options. How much time? I'll let you know. After I hung up, Patricia found me sitting in our backyard, staring at the sunset. That was Sarah, wasn't it? I nodded. She wants me back, says it was all a misunderstanding. What are you going to do? I'm going to call Richard, and then I'm going to make a decision that 8-year-old Emma can be proud of when she grows up. Because sometimes, the most important thing isn't getting your old life back. Sometimes, it's making sure the next person doesn't have to go through what you did. And Sarah Martinez was about to learn that some apologies come with conditions.